What happens when one of the world's most trusted news organizations gets caught red-handed manipulating footage of a sitting president? Over the weekend, Britain witnessed something that might just reshape its entire political landscape. This isn't just about poll numbers anymore. This is about millions of people who've stopped believing their press, stopped trusting their government, and are ready to make their voices heard. I'm talking about a BBC scandal that's shaking the foundation of British media, politicians facing unprecedented rejection, and a nation on the brink of something big. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change how you see the news forever. I used to be on the inside of a major media outlet, one of those names everyone knows and supposedly trusts. I watched editors twist stories, saw producers cherry-pick facts to fit narratives that had nothing to do with truth, so I walked away. Now I work independently, I answer to no one, and I bring you what actually matters, not what some corporation wants you to believe. And listen, if this kind of honest reporting matters to you, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you really want to support independent journalism that refuses to bow to anyone, consider becoming a channel sponsor. It's viewers like you who make it possible for me to keep speaking freely without corporate overlords breathing down my neck. Let's dive into the biggest story coming out of Britain right now. The head of BBC, the Director General himself, and the head of BBC News just resigned. Not retired gracefully, not moved on to new opportunities. They resigned in disgrace. Why? Because they got caught doing exactly what I've been warning you about for years. In 2021, BBC's flagship investigative program Panorama edited footage of Donald Trump's speech in such a way that it appeared he was directly calling for the storming of the Capitol. They skillfully spliced together fragments of his speech, creating an illusion that never existed in reality, and the part where Trump called for peaceful protest conveniently cut out completely. Now, I'm not here to defend Trump. I'm not a fan, never have been. But facts are facts, and when a news organization manipulates video to create a narrative that didn't happen, that's not journalism, that's propaganda. After days of reckoning, BBC's Tim Davie and news chief Deborah Turness handed in their resignations. The whole thing blew up across British and American media. And here's where it gets interesting. The White House got involved. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt accused BBC of dishonest and selective editing. After the resignations came through, she said this was an admission of guilt and suggested everyone switch from BBC to GB News instead. Some outlets are speculating the White House deliberately held back to let BBC leadership resign with dignity, a noble gesture if true. But mark my words, you'll soon see left-wing media spinning this as Trump settling scores and bullying British media, predictable as sunrise. Meanwhile, BBC Chairman Samir Shah called these resignations a sad day for the corporation and praised his departing colleagues for their unwavering service and dedication. Unwavering service to what exactly? To the truth or to an agenda? Because those are two very different things, and what we just witnessed tells us which one BBC chose. This is exactly why you're here watching this channel right now. You want to see behind the facade. You want someone who'll call it like it is without fear of losing advertisers or upsetting the establishment. So stick around, because we're just getting started, and the rest of what's happening in Britain is just as explosive. But the BBC scandal isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of a much larger picture of collapsing trust in British institutions. Fresh polling data just dropped, and the numbers are absolutely brutal for the current government. According to an Omnium poll, 56% of Britons want Prime Minister Keir Starmer to resign. 57% want Chancellor Rachel Reeves out. These aren't minor disapproval ratings. These are majorities demanding their leaders step down, and they've barely been in power for months. Why the rage? Because 77% of Britons believe taxes are about to skyrocket, and 61% are furious about broken campaign promises. Labour promised not to raise certain tax rates, and now everyone knows that was a lie. Trust ratings for both Starmer and Reeves have crashed to 41% and 48%, respectively. Only 26% still support Starmer as Prime Minister, and fewer than 20% back Reeves. The public overwhelmingly believes Labour's economic decisions will be unfair, and only 22% think they were honest with voters before the election. Here's the kicker. Nigel Farage, the populist firebrand everyone in the establishment loves to hate, now leads Starmer in popularity by 3 points. His Reform UK party is polling at 33%, ahead of both Labour and the Conservatives. Think about that. A party that didn't even exist a few years ago is now the most trusted political force in Britain. That's not just a protest vote, that's a revolution brewing. And if you're wondering whether things can get worse for this government, they absolutely can. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening on the ground. In Crowborough, East Sussex, hundreds of residents took to the streets to protest government plans to house 600 asylum seekers at a former military camp. People are genuinely frightened. They're worried about safety, about infrastructure collapsing under the weight of new arrivals, and about the fact that nobody consulted them before making this decision. The local police and crime commissioner Katie Bourne called the plan outrageous and said there was zero warning. Wealdon District Council demanded the project be scrapped, pointing out the government provided no guarantees of protection for either local residents or the migrants themselves. The Home Office responded with the usual bureaucratic language about how moving people to military camps will close down hotels, reduce pressure on communities, and meet all safety standards. A petition against the project has already gathered 6,000 signatures. But here's my question. Are they planning to surround these camps with barbed wire and guard towers? Because if you're trying to keep locals calm while preventing migrants from wandering into town, what exactly does that setup look like? If this kind of in-depth coverage matters to you, take a second right now to leave a comment. Tell me what you think about this asylum situation. Should communities have a say in these decisions, or should central government have total control? I read every comment, and your perspective matters. Now let's talk about something that's dividing Britain in a completely different way. Police in Wiltshire are being sued for participating in a Pride festival. Barrister Sarah Phillimore filed a lawsuit claiming that officers in uniform attending an event with rainbow flags and LGBT symbolism demonstrates political bias and undermines public trust, especially in disputes involving transgender rights. Her case is based on a similar situation with Northumbria Police, where a court ruled that such actions by officers raised doubts about law enforcement neutrality. The plaintiffs' representatives insist that Pride is a political movement and police participation is completely inappropriate. Wiltshire Police responded that their officers' presence was part of official duties, maintaining order and engaging with the community, and they've refused to comment further until the case concludes. So here's my question for you. Should police be marching in Pride parades? Is that community engagement or political activism? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this debate isn't going away anytime soon. But while police are busy marching in parades, they're also finally dealing with actual threats. 2 teenagers, ages 15 and 16 or 17, were just arrested on suspicion of planning violent acts inspired by last year's tragedy in Southport, where 17-year-old Axel Rudakubana took the lives of 3 girls at an event themed around Taylor Swift. One of the arrested teens allegedly planned an incident at an Oasis concert in Cardiff and compiled a list of potential targets. The other was preparing for something at a Taylor Swift-themed event, similar to what Rudakubana targeted. He'd been collecting knives and studying extremist materials online. Despite the similarities to the Rudakubana case, neither teenager is being charged under terrorism statutes because apparently the Crown Prosecution Service doesn't consider violence against schoolchildren and women to be ideological in nature. Let that sink in. These cases are part of a broader investigation into whether police, mental health services, and social services are prepared to prevent incidents involving teenagers who become fascinated with ideas of violence. It's a chilling trend that nobody wants to talk about, honestly. Speaking of uncomfortable truths, the British government just launched an independent investigation into why so many young people aren't working or studying. Former Health Secretary Alan Milburn will lead the inquiry. Get this, almost 1 in 8 Britons aged 16 to 24 now falls into the category of NEET, which stands for Not in Employment, Education or Training. The acronym sounds almost mocking, doesn't it? These young people aren't participating in any form of education, work or professional development, and their numbers are approaching 1 million. Work and Pensions Secretary Pat McFadden called this a crisis of opportunity requiring urgent action. About a quarter of these young people cite chronic illness or disability, and most receiving benefits claim mental health disorders or neurodevelopmental conditions. The investigation aims to identify causes, reduce long-term social costs, and help young people return to education and employment. They'll deliver a final report next summer. But here's the real question. What happened to an entire generation that nearly 1 million of them have essentially checked out of society? That's not just an economic problem, that's a civilizational warning sign. And while young people are disappearing from the workforce, others are disappearing from society entirely. Research from the charity crisis reveals that homelessness in England is far higher than official statistics show. BBC reported today that around 189,000 families and individuals living on streets in tents or crashing with friends aren't reflected in government data because they haven't sought help from local authorities. The total number of people experiencing the most severe forms of homelessness has jumped 20% since 2022, reaching nearly 300,000 people. One key factor is the surge in families placed in temporary and often unsuitable housing. Such cases more than doubled between 2020 and 2024. Authorities claim they're investing over £1 billion to combat homelessness and are preparing a new national strategy. But Crisis is calling for immediate action, stressing that thousands of people are forced to live in dangerous conditions with no right to support. So while some Britons are holding on to their homes and their savings by their fingernails, others have already lost everything. And the trend is only accelerating, but not everyone is struggling equally. The Daily Mirror ran a fascinating piece about how ordinary Britons are getting creative before Christmas. 27-year-old Madison Perkins from Wales explained how she saves up to £500 preparing for Christmas for her family of 4. She plans purchases months in advance, enters more than 10 Black Friday giveaways, where she wins expensive gifts like a Barbie Dreamhouse or Nintendo games, and hunts for discounts and special offers relentlessly. She buys meat several months before the holidays and freezes it, then grabs vegetables the day before Christmas on clearance, sometimes for as little as 8 pence. She acquires up to 60% of gifts from charity shops, makes the rest by hand, or buys with cashback. Her family also creates decorations and presents themselves to cut costs while maintaining holiday spirit. They're economizing any way they can. You wouldn't expect this level of penny pinching from Britain, would you? But that's the reality millions are facing right now. Now, some people can't afford things for entirely different reasons, and Vodafone just announced something specifically for them. Starting in November, UK military personnel can make free calls, send messages, and use mobile internet abroad in 40 countries. This initiative is timed to Remembrance Day on November 11th and aims to support British service members stationed overseas who often limit contact with loved ones due to high roaming charges. Company research found that 54% of military personnel reduce family contact because of costs, and 68% experience emotional difficulties due to isolation. But to participate in this program, service members need to sign up for a new Vodafone Unlimited airtime plan with a mobile device and a data package over 1 gigabyte. So it's not entirely free. You need to commit to a new contract, but for military families separated by deployment, it could make a real difference. Here's something that'll make your head spin. The UK Home Office is considering paying asylum seekers £100 a week if they agree to leave state-funded hotels and move in with friends or relatives already in Britain. This programme is designed to cut costs that currently run about £145 per day per person and could launch next year. Right now, around 32,000 migrants are housed in hotels, costing the budget more than £2 billion annually. Authorities also plan to use 6 former military bases where living conditions have already been upgraded to reduce dependence on hotels. These steps are part of Keir Starmer's government programme, which promised to stop using hotels for migrants by 2029. The ministry emphasizes they're working to save taxpayer money and continue offering migrants financial payments for voluntary return to their home countries. So let me get this straight. We're paying them to stay and we're paying them to leave. Brilliant economic strategy. Let me give you a quick recap before we wrap up, because there's a lot to process here. We started with the BBC scandal that cost 2 top executives their jobs after they manipulated Trump footage. We covered polling showing unprecedented rejection of Starmer and Reeves, with Farage and Reform UK surging ahead. We discussed asylum seeker housing controversies, police at Pride events, sparking lawsuits, teenagers arrested for planning violent acts, and a youth unemployment crisis approaching 1 million. We looked at soaring homelessness hidden from official statistics, families desperately economizing before Christmas, and government schemes to move asylum seekers out of expensive hotels. Every single one of these stories connects to the same theme: collapsing trust in British institutions and a population that's had enough. Now let me tell you something about the news you just heard. This program isn't just a collection of translated headlines from British media. This is a tool to help you see reality behind the facade of media manipulation. In the world of British press, where you're bombarded daily with information and propaganda, it's easy to lose yourself, to mistake lies for truth and truth for fiction. My job is to show you how to tell the difference, because you probably watch more than just this program, and that means you can compare the information for yourself. Take BBC, a legendary brand that for decades was associated not just in Britain but worldwide with trust and quality journalism. When I refused to work there after reading their contract, I realized I wouldn't last long because I couldn't present facts the way they do. In videos like that panorama piece we discussed, I saw the writing on the wall, and that's what's happening now. Fewer and fewer professionals want to work with them. They're losing the trust of millions of viewers. Why? Because standards of objectivity and honesty have been compromised. Too many cases where facts are presented with distortions, oversimplifications, or hidden meanings. The news flow from BBC, and frankly from any mainstream outlet, has become a tool of influence. It's propaganda. I've always said this and I'll keep saying it. You cannot take information at face value. You need to analyze it, verify it, question it, and especially look in the other direction. Because when all the newspapers are talking about the same thing, something else is happening somewhere that they're trying to distract you from. In an era of total disinformation, the ability to see truth behind the news facade is the key to freedom of choice and understanding what's really happening around us. I'll keep translating what the English press writes, but whether you believe everything they print or question it, that's your decision, and I think the answer is pretty obvious. In this sea of informational chaos, your critical thinking is your most valuable weapon, so if you want to keep cutting through the noise and getting the real story, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you never miss an upload, and if you believe in supporting independent journalism that answers to nobody, consider becoming a channel sponsor. Every bit of support helps me continue doing this work without compromise, without corporate control, without fear. Thanks for watching. Stay sharp out there, and I'll see you in the next one.